Welcome, Mr. Steinheuer. I suppose I pronounced correctly. And thank you very much for attending our conference. Welcome also to the audience of today. Just a few words about the context. Last April, the European Commission presented legislative proposal to reform the rule of European economic governance. The central objective of this proposal is to strengthen the sustainability of public finance in the EU and to promote sustainable and inclusive growth in the member states through reform and investment. The proposal aims to fill the gaps in the current framework. They take account of the need to reduce public debt level, to prepare the European Union for future challenges by supporting progress towards a green, digital, inclusive, and resilient economy, and to make the EU more competitive. Our speaker of today, Mr. Steinheuer, is a senior official in the German Ministry of Finance, and he is a member of the European Economics and Financial Committee. He is thus at the heart of the ongoing negotiation on this reform. And thus, we are very interested in any insight you can give us into the current discussion and hope to learn about the German government's priorities in terms of European economic governance, what reform it supports, and where there could be problems. One more thing, this webinar is a part of a debate that the Central Economic Council of Belgium is conducting about public finance. And the recording of this webinar will be available in a few days on our website, which is dedicated to this debate. Mr. Steinheuer, we have the floor. Thank you very much.
Dear Mr. Professor Beine, thank you very much for this kind introductory words, and thank you for giving me the chance to and inviting me to present here the views of the German government on the reform of the European rules on economic governance, especially on the European fiscal framework. I have to say, one small remark from my side. I'm only alternate member of the Economic and Financial Committee. This should not be too much of a difference, but otherwise my state secretary might be surprised that he's no longer the German member. So and I don't want to surprise him. But I think I'm following the debate quite closely. So I hope I'm in a position to give you some insights on the German position. And I can say the German government is really actively involved in the debate. We expressed our views in two written contributions already, the first one last year in August 2022, and then again this year in April, early April 2023. That means just a few weeks before the Commission then presented its legal proposals at the end of April, as you already said. And since these legal proposals have been put on the table, have been presented, there are really intense discussions, intense work in the Council itself and also in the relevant working group. And what I can say, the German representatives in these fora intervene on the basis of a fully coordinated government position. I emphasize this point because, frankly, we were asked in the past several times if some of our interventions were only on behalf of the Ministry of Finance, and I can say no, this is not the case. We have a coordinated government position, and that is what I try to present to you. And well, as a starting point, I would like to remind us, why do we need fiscal rules in the European Union, especially in the euro area? We do face, and I think that was clear from the very first discussions on the economic and monetary union, a situation where the monetary policy is fully centralized today by the ECB, but fiscal policy is still dominated and probably will be dominated quite for years to come by member states, and so it's still decentralized. And in such a situation, there is a serious risk that an excessive use of public debt financing of one member state may lead to negative spillovers on others. In the worst case, where a member state experiences difficulties in obtaining financing, this can threaten the stability of the entire currency union. And I suppose you all know, you're all aware, it's not just theory I'm talking about. I mean, we have been confronted with that situation in the euro area debt crisis, especially, of course, in 2010, but also later on. But even if this worst situation does not arise, even if the access to capital markets is not put into doubt, too much public debt financing can undermine or make monetary policy at least more difficult. And once again, this is not just a theory. Since last year, since the steep increase in inflation, the ECB is constantly asking for a rather restrictive fiscal policy stance by member states. So I would say there are good reasons to have fiscal rules even without being member of a common currency area. And then just to say, for example, just 2 days ago, my minister met his counterpart from Switzerland, and the Swiss minister, Mrs. Keller-Sutter, she made very clear that she thinks that the Swiss debt brake is a very good and necessary framework for the Swiss fiscal policy. And we all know Switzerland is not a member of the European Union, either, of the Eurozone. So these kind of rules may, and I do think may make sense for without being in the common currency. But here we do have an additional reasoning, and I hope that it makes clear that that we have these additional arguments to have such rules in the economic and monetary union, and therefore the German position is clear. We need European fiscal rules that focus on the core objectives of debt sustainability and sound public finances. Having said that, of course, we are aware that most, if not all, member states face significant investment needs, especially in the field of the green transformation. And therefore, we should also aim at improving the quality of public finances. The fiscal situation of member states differs significantly, I think. Nevertheless, we see that at least for quite a number of member states, a reduction of debt in relation to GDP as well as a reduction of the public deficit is required. Both reduction of the deficit as well as of the debt to GDP ratio can and should be done step by step. So taking these challenges together, we firmly believe that we need a rules-based system with clear quantitative requirements to safeguard sound public finances in Europe. And we need effective multilateral surveillance and also to strengthen incentives for public and private investment in future growth. So that for us is the outset. And now looking at the proposals of the Commission, the question for us is, do they deliver on these challenges? And I can say we see these proposals as a move in the right direction, but at the same time, we think that they not fully adequately reflect important issues for reform. Let me go somewhat more into detail. As you probably know, and the proposal very much relies on the instrument of the debt sustainability analysis, the DSA. The DSA is the starting point in the proposal of the Commission to derive in a primarily bilateral process between the Commission and the member state an individual fiscal adjustment path for that member state. And let me be frank, we have some doubts if the DSA should play such a central role in the framework. And it's not, let me be very clear on that, it's not that we think this instrument is useless, not at all. The German government sees the DSA as a very important analytical tool. But at the same time, we must not forget it poses, and it will necessarily pose also in the future, quite a number of methodological questions, as well as that you need assumptions to implement the DSA, assumptions on long-term growth, interest rates, inflation. And so only relying on that instrument, primarily relying on that instrument, we have some doubts that we will end up with a transparent, rules-based system. That is what we aim for. We think for a rules-based system, we need clear quantitative requirements. And indeed, we have proposed in our second paper I mentioned in April, and then later on, of course, now in the ongoing discussions in the Council and in the Working Party, 2 concrete quantitative requirements. The first one we call numerical benchmark. This is much about reduction of deficits. The basic requirement here is that spending has to increase more slowly than potential growth. The difference between potential growth and net primary expenditure growth is defined as the convergence margin. And the pace of deficit reduction should be dependent on the member state's debt challenge. i.e. that means that the higher the debt ratio, the larger the convergence margin should be. We think about, but this is of course a starting point for discussion. It's not end of the debate, so to say, that we think for member states with high debt ratios, the minimum convergence margin could be 1 percentage point. That is on this numerical benchmark. The second requirement is what we call a common safeguard. And why do we think it's needed? Looking at expenditure as the main indicator has one drawback that should not be overlooked. Developments on the revenue side may not be fully addressed. Structural change in revenues may lead to a worsening of the fiscal position in spite of adhering to the benchmark. And that outcome would not be beneficial to anyone, to the member state as well as to the union. Therefore, we propose an additional kind of safeguard to ensure a sufficient reduction in debt to GDP ratios. A requirement for the annual reduction of the debt to GDP ratio. In our comments, we provided a quantitative example for such a safeguard. At least 1 percentage point reduction per year for high debt levels, and for medium debt levels, at least 0.5 percentage points reduction per year. And you may ask, how do these 2 requirements fit in the proposal of the Commission? In our view, and that is the way we have proposed it, it would form the basis for transparent rules-based minimum requirements. And it may be the case that they are not always binding, in the sense that the requirements derived from the DSA, as it is proposed by the Commission, may be more ambitious. And indeed, we have some simulations from the Commission that hint in that direction. So it's not, we are not against the Commission's proposal, but we think we should have some kind of minimum requirements directly derived from a rules-based system, and that can play together. And finally, of course, it's a question of how to calibrate the system. Now, I spoke about requirements. How ambitious should a fiscal consolidation path be? But I think at least as important as the design of the system is the question of how to implement it and how to ensure that it will be implemented consistently. And we think it is important that the Council is able to continue to play its role in budgetary surveillance appropriately. Finally, it is a Commission together with the Council. The 2 institutions have together to implement the this new or reformed system. And that means that also member states, the Council, represented in the Council, have to play a decisive role in defining important technical details of fiscal rules and multilateral surveillance. Our impression is, frankly, looking at the proposal, that the Commission leaves very broad room for interpretation of the rules to itself, to the Commission itself. Very important questions are in annexes. So far, so good. It's not the problem of the annex, but these annexes can be changed by delegated, or according to the Commission proposal, changed by delegated acts. where the Commission has a very strong role to play, and we don't think this is the right way to go. The two institutions, Commission and Council, who have the common task to implement the framework should also have a common understanding on how to apply it and therefore work together on the details of the application. And just to maybe to give you two examples what we have in mind. One is, and I mentioned it, the DSA, and we would agree that you cannot spell out each and every detail of such a complex instrument for many years in the regulation. That would be too technical and too specific. Also having or taking into account that that the methodology may be improved over time. And we do have also experience with such a situation in the current framework, which is still existing. We should not forget we do have a fiscal framework. It's not that we are in a situation without one. We do have one. There is still the potential output and the structural balance, which depends, the calculation very much depends on the potential output, plays a crucial role. And again, also here, you do have methodological questions, maybe less on assumptions, what is also an issue for the DSA, but on methodology, you do have questions. And we have a working group which works intensely on continuously improving the methodology, but ensuring that we have a common understanding how to deal with these questions. And I think something similar we should have if the DSA finally gets such an important role in the system. A second example I would like to mention is the expenditure path. It seems more or less agreed that the central indicator for defining the fiscal policy over a couple of years will be public expenditure. And then if that is the case, we think we should have a common understanding what happens if this path, which will be specified and spelled out as a requirement for a given member state, what happens if there is a breach. It can probably only be, and that is already in the draft of the Commission, the opening of an EDP, but the question is how severe has such a breach to be. The Commission now says, let's not be too explicit here, let's not tie our hands. We are somewhat skeptical here. We think we should once again have a common understanding. And from my experience working on these issues for a while, I can say if you apply such a rule, it would be a new one. But if you apply it for one member state in one way or the other, then in the next situation, everyone will say, well, equal treatment. Then the way it has been applied before will be expected to be applied again, which I think make equal treatment is a very fundamental principle of our work together. And I think that's rightly so, but then it may make sense, it's at least our view, to define already in advance how we will deal with such a situation. Finally, maybe two words or a couple of words on the process. From what I said, you will see that we are not completely in line with the Commission's proposal. We have some significant, we think some significant amendments should be made. Others, we are not alone. Others have, to some extent, different views. So we are not there, to be quite frank. Nevertheless, and that's rightly so, the Spanish presidency aims for a general approach of the Council for November. And as I said, we support this ambitious approach. It means intense discussions now that the working party will start already late August to work again, to meet again, and will have intense discussions, but also the Council will have them, rightly so. we will see if this is feasible. We, Germany, want definitely to be constructive here and to contribute to a solution. I would like to, and these are my final remarks, and just to make you aware that we already, when we put on the table our first contribution, we already made some, from our point of view, significant concessions. One is, and that is, as far as I know, also for Belgium an issue, that we accepted, before the Commission came up with the proposals, that the expenditure path should be the main indicator. That is for us internally really difficult, I have to say that, because the structural balance, which is today the central indicator for fiscal policy in the existing framework, is, and that was the case for quite a while in the European Union. And then in Germany, we said we should mirror this in our national rules. We did so. Even in our constitution, the structural balance plays even a role in our constitution. That is very important for us to coordinate our fiscal policy between the levels of government. And as far as I know, it's a similar issue for Belgium. So federal level, and in our case, it's so-called lenders, the states, we would have severe problems to divide a kind of expenditure path between these levels and then also horizontally. That is, so we asked if we go in that direction, that for the member state at stake, it should be feasible to do a recalculation and work internally with the structural balance. That seems to be accepted by European partners. But I wanted to make clear that accepting that not the structural balance, but the expenditure path will probably play the central role in the new system is a big step for us to take internally. We have been criticized for that, but we said, well, as the clear majority of European partners want to go in that direction, also into international institutions, as the IMF advise us to do so, we want to be constructive, even if it creates problems for us internally. That is the one thing. And the other thing I want to mention is that we already last year in August, from 1 year ago, said the so-called 120th rule, the existing rule, how to deal with too high debt to GDP ratios, which does not say, by the way, to reach the so-called 60% threshold within 20 years. That is often what you read in the newspapers. It's wrong. It says 1/20th of the public debt, which goes beyond 60% of GDP, has to be reduced over 1 year. So this is, and next year is once again 1/20th. So it's not a linear approach, and it can take much more than 20 years to come to 60%. I insist on that because we are often confronted with this wrong reading. But nevertheless, we accepted that applying this existing rule in some cases may be overly ambitious and lead to fiscal reduction requirements which are economically not sensible. That was also a big step for us to take. We did so. My minister declared this publicly. It wasn't not an easy step for him. So on these two issues, I would like to really to say we did quite substantial, took quite substantial steps to contribute to a common position. And frankly, of course, we are looking for others to do similar steps, and we hope this will happen. And then we are quite optimistic that we can reach a good solution for all of us. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions in the audience?
Thank you for this Good and insightful explanation. It helps us a lot, I think, to have such a concise presentation of the position of the German government. I have a question on the common aggregate fiscal position of the euro area. We are in a situation that the common debt level of the eurozone is around between 80 and 90%, I guess. So if the rules are implemented, some countries will have to do a large effort, other a minor effort, but still an effort. And so one can fear that we will be in a situation that commonly we are in a regressive or I don't find the exact word, but restrictive. That is the more exact word. Common European fiscal policy, and at times, at the same time, that we need now very, very large investments for the climate and digital transition. All calculations show, of course, the private sector have to do a large effort, but the public sector as well. And we are, so to say, in a decade of investments where you need this space. So the two don't go very much together. And my question is that not a reason, only apart from these investments needs, you would say that a more neutral fiscal stance is positive, and so you can't be too restrictive for countries in debt positions, or you could also say you must be more compulsory for countries who have space. But this equilibrium, this balance never has been seen in the old rules and not in the new rules. Because if you look at Germany, if you look at for instance, the debt break in the constitutions, even if Germany would have a debt of less than 60%, the constitution would oblige Germany to still be quite restrictive and don't allow itself for a more stimulating governmental fiscal positions. So there are some contradictions. One is this disequilibrium between obligations for countries in penable situations and other countries who can afford more. Another is the aggregate fiscal stance of the euro area, and then the investment needs, and all these plead for some flexibility. And my question is this not in contrast with the demands of Germany, which are clear but are quite demanding, especially for countries with larger debt challenges?
Thank you, Renat.
Should I answer?
Yes, sure.
Well, thank you for the question, and of course this is an issue which is also part of the discussions of the ongoing discussions. My answer would be I would differentiate somewhat between the aggregate fiscal stance as a concept which, as far as I understand, is very much on steering trying to steer, let's say, the aggregate output. So a question of how to influence the cycle or to react on the economic cycle. And here I would say, and that is, I can rely these days on the Commission as well as on the ECB. So it's not primarily a German position to say we don't see that we are in a situation right now for being expansionary, but rather restrictive, simply with looking at where we are in the cycle and looking, well, one indicator is definitely the inflation. We think a central economic problem of our days, and maybe for a while to be with us, hopefully not for too long. That is, of course, primarily the task of the ECB. but fiscal policy can make it more difficult or less difficult for the ECB to do its job. And so we are not, and this is also, I can say, a common view among Euro area finance ministers, and has been expressed in several statements of the Euro area, of the Eurogroup, sorry, that it's not the time for being expansionary, but rather for having a restrictive aggregate fiscal stance. I don't think this is in contradiction with having the need of, and I do not deny this, of significant public investment financing. But there, we think we are primarily in a situation where, and this is not easy to do, I know that, we have to speak about the structure of public expenditure. And don't let me be misunderstood. We are not, Germany is definitely not asking for having same expenditure ratios for each and every member state. That is up to the member state to decide. We do have decentralized fiscal policy. That is one of the founding decisions of the Economic and Monetary Union. I don't think that anyone takes this into doubt. So if some member states think they should have a higher expenditure and public expenditure ratio than others, it's up to them to decide. The question is how to finance, and what we are talking about with fiscal rules is primarily to which extent you can make use of public debt financing. And here, sometimes it seems to me that the debate goes in, gives the impression that the limits for public debt financing stem from the framework we are talking about. I would not go along with that view. I think limits are there. We can discuss how narrow they are, but you do have limits simply with regard to the access to capital markets, and we know that it can be really devastating if this access is taken into account. The rules we have are only to avoid that we get in a situation where this happens, which is damaging for the member state at stake, but also for the Euro area as a whole. But once again, I do not deny that we do have investment needs, but the instrument of public debt financing can be used only to a certain extent, and we think this framework we are talking about should ensure that we do not come too close to these limits, which exist independently of the framework. But if we come too close or even get too far, this may be very negative for all of us. That is the logic we come from. And so with the investment needs, finally, that is, as I said, a difficult task, but it's a necessary task for domestic fiscal policy to make the decisions with regard to the structure of public expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question? Stefan.
Yeah, firstly, of course, I also want to thank you for your presentation and the openness to discuss the German point of view. So my question is, if I understand correctly, the German government is in favor of a bigger role for the Council of the EU to enforce the rules of the European fiscal framework. So I wonder if that doesn't create the risk that there will then be more potentially endless discussions between the different countries, with potential conflicts as well between the countries, and perhaps even some blocks forming where certain countries will protect other countries in order to prevent that they themselves would be the next in line. So yeah, what is your position about that, or your view?
Once again, thank you very much for the question, and I definitely understand what your worries are, and you're talking to a representative of the German government, and maybe you have a situation in mind which is fortunately some years ago, but not that long ago, in 2003, where some member states, including Germany, said, well, the at that time for excessive deficit procedures should not be taken forward. That was what at that time was at stake. And indeed, several member states expressed that situation, and then the Council came to that decision. Let me be clear first that if I say the Council should play a bigger role, that was with regard to the proposal we have on the table, which, at least according to our reading, gives the Commission a stronger role in interpreting the rules than it has today. And already today, rightly so, the Commission is a very central player here, and that is not, and then we do not want to be misunderstood in a way that we put into doubt in any way the right and the role, and very important role of the Commission as guardian of the treaties. And there, the Commission has the first mover, is it an advantage, but is the first mover and has to implement these rules, the existing rules, and if we will get new ones, also the new ones in first instance. That I do not deny in any way. Please don't misunderstand me here. But I think we need, or that is a German position, it's not just my personal conviction, that we need to have this framework. It will be legal, has its legal foundation, but to work, it needs also political acceptance. And we are convinced that this can only work if these two institutions, Commission and Council, work together. And then, therefore, they should have, as far as possible, the same interpretation of the rules. That was what I wanted to make clear. We will have necessarily questions which cannot be spelled out in each and every detail for many years to come in a regulation. This regulation would be too technical and too stable. You have to adapt to some extent also this interpretation of the rules, but this should be done commonly. That is what I wanted to say. Otherwise, our worry would be that the political acceptance, and that is the primary role, we think, would be endangered. It's not that we don't accept that the Commission has a central role to play here. And frankly, with your worry, which, as I said, I do understand that in the Council, then you may have blocking minorities or something like that. I don't think this is excluded. I can't exclude this. But if the Council doesn't play a political role here, who else will do it? My worry is, and now what I now say is not formal German position. It's more thinking aloud. I hope you understand what I'm saying. That you will have fiscal policy is at the very heart of the political process, and you will have somewhere political deliberations, necessarily so. And is it better? This is all completely internal in the Commission internally. I'm not convinced that this is the better way to take. Frankly, there is one element I didn't mention in my presentation. We are open, I can say, and I think my Dutch colleague gave also a presentation. Yeah, I don't know if he mentioned that the Netherlands, but I know that they are in favor of giving the European Fiscal Board a greater role as a kind of independent advisory body. And I can say we are also open for these kind of deliberations, because you can hope that such a body is taking political considerations less into account. You will have them necessarily. It's no way to avoid them. And as I said, fiscal policy is part of the political process. It's at the very heart of the political process. That is unavoidably so. And one last remark on this one. I think this risk exists, but I think if the requirements we have stem from a rather simple and transparent rules-based system, it should be somewhat easier at least to say, well, it's quite obvious this requirement has not been met, and now we have to take a first step on. The second one, then in a situation where this requirement stems from a rather opaque bilateral negotiation process, even if you say this may be more adequate to an individual situation, I doubt this, but the binding character, we think, is clearer if you have as a basis such a rules-based system, and that is one further argument why we are in favor of such a system. I stop here. Thank you.
But thank you very much, and I just explained that it's very important to understand the position of other country, to analyze correctly the position of different country, and to build a position of the social partner in Belgium, because we try to have outside of the government a position of the social partner in Belgium is maybe different from other country, but for the social partners in Belgium, it's very important to have a position and to discuss about the problem of budgetary governance in Belgium, but also in Europe. And thank you very much, and maybe next time. And thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much for your kind words and for giving me the chance to present here. And if I may say so, on a personal basis, give good advice to my Belgian colleagues. I work very closely with them. I like them, and the Belgian position is as important as ours. And let's hope we find a good solution for all of us.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you.